helping him recuperate from the illness. That's the mitzvah bikul cholim. So all of these different mitzvahs are different expressions of chesed, of kindness. And chesed is an expression of compare yourself. You are required to walk in the ways of Hashem and to reflect Hashem and to make your ways the ways of Hashem. So basically, what we're saying is that this mitzvah, really number 5 or 6 in the book, Positive Mitzvahs, comes after the first 4, which acknowledges Hashem in the first place. Those first 4 are what we call mitzvahs tamidiyos, the constant mitzvahs. That means mitzvahs that you're required to do every single waking second of your life. These mitzvahs of belief in Hashem, belief Hashem is one, love Hashem, and fear Hashem are basics that need to be constant in the person's mind at all times. They need to be on your consciousness at all times. How is it possible to do more than one mitzvah at the same time? The answer is if it's not an action, but rather a thought process. If it's a thought process, you can think of the same thoughts in the same time, and they are the thoughts of Hashem. Hashem is one. There is no other. The sense of Hashem's oneness. Of these 4 mitzvahs, know Hashem is one, love Hashem, fear Hashem, the non-Jewish world is only obligated in one of them. That is to know Hashem. The sense of Hashem is one, there's nothing else in life that matters but Hashem, is not within the realm of the non-Jew, is not within the realm of a non-Jew to understand. What does it mean to know that Hashem is one, that he's the only one? That means to say that any other endeavor in life that is without Hashem or outside of Hashem's realm has no meaning, has no lasting power, and it has no ultimate success. So people who engage in all sorts of engaging activities, whether it's professional or whether it's vacational, whatever they're doing, if it's not within the scope of what Hashem wants you to do, and it does not have a consciousness of Hashem as bringing you success in your activities, it's a waste of time at best, and it is a violation of Hashem Echad. But this mitzvah of Hashem Echad is applicable only to the Jewish people. We said the mitzvah of Hashem Echad comes from the Shema. The Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad is from Yisrael. It's only upon Israel. Shema Yisrael, only Israel understands Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem is our God, Hashem Echad, God is one. The idea of Hashem Echad means that he runs the world, he's the only power, and therefore anything I undertake without him or ignoring him, or let's say violating any one of his mitzvos, cannot succeed. Ultimately, it may succeed temporarily as perhaps an illusion, as perhaps trying to fake you out, and you can labor under the illusion. Well, I went to work this morning without davening. So I'm going to work this morning without davening. I had an early client. What could I do? But you can't possibly get a bracha from that. It's impossible. It doesn't work because you have simply neglected or ignored Hashem, and you have no bracha. Person doesn't keep Shabbos, is not careful with Shabbos, with the details of Shabbos, for instance. How can he possibly expect or hope to have success, let's say, during the rest of the week? It's impossible. Person who engaged in a relationship that is not blessed by Hashem, let's say, with a proper wedding and a proper sense of an acquisition and the proper legal commitments that are supposed to be made between husband and wife, and you expect that relationship to last? That's ridiculous. So that's, again, the constancy of Hashem is the constancy of Hashem as one, is the only one. But this, again, Goyim don't have this obligation. Goyim do a lot of big things in the world because they're not impacting the world. They're just more walking through. Unless they do make an attempt to, let's say, and they make an attempt to be part of the Jewish people in some way. Maybe they want to be helpful, supportive, support Israel, help out the Jewish families, the synagogue, whatever. And a lot of non-Jewish people do that. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing, and they can earn certainly great reward from Hashem in that matter. But you have to have a certain clear recognition of Hashem in everything you do. That's Hashem Echad. So if these mitzvahs are applicable to the Jews, then comes the mitzvah of love Hashem. The very next pasuk, the very next passage after the Shema, after acknowledging Hashem as one, is the passage V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, to love God. So to love God means that He's my sole passion in life. He's my singular drive, the essence of my joy. That's a hard thing to achieve because we all have interests and desires and whatever, and we all make God a part of our lives. The question is the essence of our lives. Rebbe went further. My Rebbe, Reb Noach, would say, no, it's the essence of your life. Is the only part of your life. Reb Noach was on a very, very high level of consciousness, of spiritual consciousness. But to have this sense of Hashem in your life is a sense that this is what it's all about, and this is what I'm striving for and fighting for. And therefore, all my passion is in this passion. Sometimes people try it, but don't find it. They don't get, it doesn't happen to them for some reason or another. And that's disappointing. And, you say your prayers and you don't getting anything out of it for whatever reason. And you're not feeling it, you're not sensing it, you're not internalizing it. And that, again, is a personal disappointment, which a person can readily sense or feel on any given day. So in that regard, again, you got to fight strong within yourself and really focus and concentrate to really get the love of Hashem inside you. Once you do that, then you have this concept of the fear of Hashem. What's the fear of Hashem? Fear of Hashem is that sense of His absolute awesome majesty. That's to try and get even the slightest perspective of who is God, what is God. And that's also very, very struggling and very challenging, and you got to work hard at it to think about it and concentrate on it when you have any opportunity you get. Once you're in these four mental states, then we get active. This activeness can't be a constant because you can't do it all the time. You can, in fact, think these four items all the time, but you can't. What's one of the positive acts? Well, that would be the one we're talking about, doing chesed. Of all the things Hashem is famous for, he's famous for creation. Creation is a chesed, it's a kindness. Persons bring children into the world, it's the greatest kindness. The people of Sodom were homosexual, was the crime of the fact that they didn't want to have children. They didn't want to bring them themselves, share their wealths. And that's why they were all destroyed. Because someone brought up the idea that they had children in Sodom, obviously. Obviously, the Lot who lived there, his own daughters married Sodom people, whatever. But they were probably planning on having kids 10 years later, whatever. That's what people do nowadays anyway. Oh, I'm kids when I'm ready, I'm not ready yet. I'm too busy Saturday night partying. But I'm emotionally ready, mentally ready. Well, they're right about that. They're certainly not mentally ready. The truth is that when we begin to think in these terms, so then we realize that having children, the mitzvah puruvu, which is in the very, very parsha of the Torah, Hashem blesses Adam and Chava with, is a mitzvah of loving kindness. It's a mitzvah of loving kindness, of chesed, of which the whole world is created. And if God created the world and created Adam and Eve, when we create a new child, we do the same. And so that, of course, is what we've been learning up till now, the early infancy of the world, the embryonic state of the world, God creating Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Chava, Gan Eden, and throughout the rebuilding of the world through Noach, and finally with Avram Avinu taking the charge to get the world in mental shape to understand its reality, which is Hashem. At this point, Avram embarks upon a career, which we learned 2 weeks ago, with his wife together. He brings the men closer to Hashem. She brings the women closer to Hashem. And together, they work together, they bring in guests, hospitality, show kindness. And by showing kindness, you show people about Adam and Avram and Sarah would bring in, let's say, people they're bringing people to their home. Hello, come in, welcome, have some food, have some, and of course, we bring them a beautiful full course meal. And Avram would say, are you ready to eat? Sure, I'm ready to eat. Thank you. It's a delicious plate over here. It's appetizing. And he'd say, okay, say a bracha. What? Say a bracha? Yeah. You got to pay for this. It's a bracha. You got to give a bracha to Hashem. You got to thank Hashem for it. I'm obligated to give you, but you're obligated to be appreciative. Not to me. So the guy would say, well, thank you, Avram. And he'd say, don't thank me. It's not mine. Well, who should I thank? Thank Hashem. It's his. That's where the food came from. So once the person got this perspective from his host, from Avram Avinu, he came closer to Hashem as well. All of a sudden, people are coming closer to Hashem by the droves because Avram and Sarah are loaded with Agnosos Orchim. First of all, they're loaded. They got a lot of money. They got a lot of cattle and a lot of food and a lot of everything. They're just doing fabulous in their financial perspective. Because why? Because they're blessed by Hashem. Why are they blessed by Hashem? Because they're using it for Hashem's work, to bring people closer to Hashem. That's what they're spending their money on. They're not going to Vegas with their money. So this teaches us that we have to walk in the ways of Hashem. And that's the next mitzvah that comes after the 4 mental mitzvahs. Know Hashem is one, love Hashem, fear Hashem, walk in Hashem's ways, follow in Hashem's ways. What does Hashem do? What is his ways? His ways are kindness. After all, he created a world and brought mankind into the world. That's the greatest hospitality, Agnosos Orchim, and guests you could ever have. Bring people into your house. As Hashem bringing people into his world. Adam and Chava realize they're naked. He gives them clothing. What kind of greater chesed is that they help people out with food, clothing, shelter? And Noach, he does chesed to animals. Well, if that's the case, then you should. The animals are God's creatures. They shouldn't be hurt or harmed in any way. We learned that from Noach because the extra mitzvah that came upon the Goyim was the mitzvah of not eating a limb from a live animal, which of course means that you can't have cruelty, and certainly not to human beings. This is the case of Noach giving food to all the animals, a tremendous zookeeper. All this is happening as an expression of loving kindness. All this, somebody's making. Tone down. So all this kindness is happening, and Avram brings it to a fine art. He brings it to a fine art, to a higher level, to the level of what kindness is supposed to be. It's just like Hashem. So whatever Hashem does, I do. Hashem clothe the naked, I'm going to do that. Hashem brings in people to his house, I'm going to do that. Hashem gives food, he gave every tree in the Garden of Eden except one thing, got the Adam and Chava. I'll give you anything you want in my house that you have to eat, except non-kosher. Then, of course, this kindness continues, and the kindness is that besides hospitality and clothing and so forth, is to help the unfortunate. Avram is recovering from circumcision. He's in a hospitalized state, even though it's the hospital, and he's infirmed, and Hashem comes to visit him. But once Hashem comes to visit him, he leaves Hashem behind, as we learned 2 weeks ago. Because why? Oh, actually, a week ago, we learned, why does he leave Hashem behind him? Because he's got this opportunity for guests. And he says to Hashem, for as much as it is an incredible experience to communicate with Hashem, as you come to visit me during my recuperation, It's a greater mitzvah, a great experience to actually act like God and to bring in guests. So our goal is higher than communication with God. Our goal is be like God, feel like God. When you do these kind of generous, magnanimous acts, you absolutely feel or get a perspective of who God is. Now you get a sense of the majesty. Now you get a sense of the awesomeness of God. Now you have true fear of God in your heart because you see how incredibly powerful and generous with that power he is. And that's real power. And when we see that within ourselves on a very small scale. But of course, once we do all these kindnesses, we also realize something else about ourselves. And that is there's always something hidden that we want in return. I gave you a kindness, give me a kindness back. And maybe it's subtle, maybe it's not really completely thought out. Maybe it's not, maybe I don't really consciously am aware of it, but subconsciously inside me, I'm hoping that this guy will do me a favor. I mean, after all, I did him a favor. So I'm hoping he'll do me a favor. So the subconsciousness about a certain return on the experience or return on the investment is inside everybody. The more religious people on a lower level, to less religious people on a higher level. Some people, really looking for something. Other people, not really, but deep down. So it's, the more spiritual you are, the less you want in return. The less spiritual you are, the more you want in return. And then along comes a chesed, a kindness, that is absolutely, totally, 100% selfless. 100%. I don't. I'm not interested in personal return at all, and that's the mitzvah of helping someone who's dead, and to go to a funeral, and to provide what is called chesed shel emet, a kindness of truth. Kindness of truth is, you can't pay me back. You're dead. When a person does that, that person is truly, completely in walking in the ways of Hashem. And that's why it's so important to go over the funeral service as Avraham did it in yesterday's parsha. So Avraham comes and he finds that Sarah's passed on. Sarah's passed on is an amazing passing because she passed on right after her son is almost killed by the Akedah. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky teaches that one should not assume that she died before her time. She lived 127 years, and those were great years. That's Rashi explains them. That's why the Torah tells us how she lived and how much greatness was in every year, every day of her life, how much productivity. And one should also realize that this is her time. But it happens to be that Hashem worked it out, that it should be right after the Akedah, after the near sacrifice of Isaac by his father Avraham. And we talked about the sacrifice Thursday night, explaining that Yitzchak became of age at the sacrifice. Why? Because what we explained was that the name Yitzchak, we explained this on Thursday, is spelled Yud Tzadik Chet Kuf. The Yud, all of these letters in his name represent certain numbers. Yud represents 10. It represents the 10 tests of Avraham. And we looked at the 10 tests on Thursday. And I said the point that every single test was a challenge to one thing that Avraham wanted more than anything else, and that was children. Why does Avraham want children more than anything else? Nothing else matters to him. And he has money, and he has power, and he has servants and maids and cattle and horses and donkeys and camels and whatever you want. He's got it. Richest man in town. And he's unhappy. He's unhappy. And Hashem tells him, I'm going to give you much blessing. And he says to Hashem, what can you bless me with? What can you give me? I already have. I got everything I want. except the child. So in Avram's despair, as he says to Hashem, the best you gave me was Eliezer. Who's Eliezer? So, of course, if you read the parasha yesterday, you saw that Eliezer is a very famous and important player in this whole story. Eliezer makes the shidduch. He's the matchmaker between Yitzchak and Rivka. That's a pretty big job. That's a chesed. Can you imagine the kindness of bringing two people together for eternal happiness? Can you think of what the thing is to match up two people who don't know each other, who fall in love because of you? And their eternal happiness because of you? Hope they don't come back after 5 years and blame you, God forbid. But understand the kindness of it. You understand the kindness of a person losing a lost item. I talked about it. What'd you lose? I lost something very valuable to me, a keepsake, something of personal significance. Someone finds it and returns it to you, goes out of his way to return to you a lost item. What a kindness that is. So Adam went to sleep. Hashem put him to sleep and took out his rib and made a woman. So everybody gets born, every man is born without missing that rib. So in a sense, he has a loss. Maybe he loses this, he loses that, he loses his wallet. He lost a rib. So therefore, the rib is not coming to look after him. He's got to look after the rib. He's got to find the rib. He's got to find his wife. That's his job in life. You help him. Bring up, here's your rib back. Here's yours. That's your wife, your destiny. Tremendous kindness to bring people together. And that's what Eliezer did. How did Eliezer do it? So I'm digressing now, but I just want to tell you a little story about how you make a shidduch work. And I may have mentioned a little bit about this on Thursday night as well. The first thing you got to do is you got to be, again, without personal interest. And Eliezer had a personal interest. Eliezer had a personal interest in this problem because after Avram said, I need you to go back and get a wife for my son Yitzchak, because my son Yitzchak is very holy after having given his life at the near sacrifice, the Akedah, and on Mount Moriah, and I was going to kill him and he was ready to be killed, the sacrifice to Hashem. At that point, he became of age, as we explained. He became a great man, and greatness cannot happen without a wife. He can't become the great man he needs to be without his rib, without his support. It's got to be a special woman, not the women here in Canaan. So, of course, what Eliezer understands or did not understand is that suppose I go there and I get to find the right girl and she doesn't want to go. Should I go somewhere else? And he used a very interesting word for perhaps. Perhaps I should go somewhere else. He used the word in Hebrew. The word in Hebrew for perhaps is ulai. Maybe. Maybe I should go somewhere else. But the word ulai is spelled Aleph, Vav, Lamed, Yud. Ulai. I could take that Vav out and make the U a sound without the Vav by putting 3 dots diagonally down from left to right. Then the word would be spelled Aleph, Lamed, Yud, which could also mean Eli to me. I've just taken out the vowel sound of U and put the vowel sound of A. Instead of Ulai, it becomes Eli. Eli means me. Not maybe, but Eli means me. Meaning, I'm subtly, maybe unconsciously, hinting to Avram, in case the woman doesn't want to come back, I got a daughter, come to me. You took to marry my daughter. And Avram says, nothing doing. Why nothing doing? Because you see, you're a domestic. And we talked about, I think we said about domestic on Thursday, that domestic means you are a person who not only comes from the city of Damascus, which some say is Damascus, but you also, the word domestic is broken up to teach the lesson, you draw into the well of my Torah and teach it to everybody. And that's a problem. What's the problem in that? If I had a student that was constantly teaching my words and teaching my thoughts to other people, I'd be delighted. I'd be jumping up and down for joy. What's wrong with that? And he tells it to God. He says, God, you've given me everything in life and you've given me nothing. Everything is nothing. Not worth anything. I don't appreciate anything because I want a child. And the best you gave me is Eliezer Damasek. And Eliezer, who's truly a very wonderful person and a great and devoted servant, the one I'm going to send my son to, and the one I'm going to send to find a wife for my son, is the best. He's a Damasek. He just teaches my Torah to everybody else. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is he doesn't have or possess the power or the creativity or the sense of deeper analytic understanding to be able to apply my words to a new generation and become a new leader. He's a good follower, but he's not a good leader because he doesn't possess the sense of being able to create a new idea out of the information I give. Create new stuff, adapt it, apply it, show where my words work in a way that I didn't even think about, that you could think about, because you're creative. You're the one who can do it. Eliezer couldn't do it, but Yitzchak did. That's why Yitzchak was the right one. And that's why Avram says, I need a wife for Yitzchak that's special, not your daughter. So Avram tells Eliezer, I need a wife for my daughter, not a wife for my son, not your daughter. It's got to be a woman who has the same creativity as Yitzchak. How did Yitzchak get his creativity? Did they get his creativity? It was at the Akedah, the near sacrifice. At the near sacrifice, they were walking together, father and son in loyalty, when Yitzchak pops up and says, Father, where's the lamb? And father responds and says, the lamb? Hashem will show us the lamb, my son. Implying, you're the lamb, my son. At this point, Yitzchak should have taken off, but he didn't. It says, once again, a second time, the Torah repeats the same words. They walked together. Similar mind, similar purpose. I'm ready to sacrifice my son. I'm ready to sacrifice my life. All of a sudden, Yitzchak moves into a new role in his life. He becomes a man with creativity. He has a special wife. This man of creativity became so at this moment because, as we said, Avraham all his life wanted a child more than anything else, and Hashem denied him. This test, that test, every time of the way, every step of the way, Hashem gave him a new test that denied the opportunity for children. And Avraham said to Hashem, okay, you must have a long-range plan. Finally, when he's 100, he gets the kid. But how do you know he's going to be the right one? Until he trains the kid, teaches the kid, shows the kid, and the kid finally begins to be on his own, and he says, I'm not going to the sacrifice because you're telling me I'm going to the sacrifice because I want to go. At that moment, his destiny is born, as we said, Rivka. Rivka is born at the time of the Akedah, as we explained Thursday night. That means he's ready to take his role as a new leader. He needs a new wife who's going to be his helpmate. So the first step towards being a kind person and making a match, if you want to be a matchmaker, is you got to be selfless. No other interest but helping this couple. Not for money, not for gold, not for personal gain or for accolade or for appreciation. I'm just trying to do Hashem's work to bring the two of you happy and closer, like Hashem brought Eve to Adam, Chava to Adam. And so Eliezer embarks. The next step towards making a good shidduch, towards making a good match, he's got to pray. And in this sense, not only does the matchmaker have to pray, but so does the girl, and so does the boy. So you got to pray. And in praying, Eliezer's prayer is answered immediately. Why is it answered immediately? Because when he prayed with such sincerity, he could have prayed, you know what? Hashem, help me out there. Help me to find the right girl for Avram's son, Yitzchak. But, if it doesn't work out, maybe I'll go back and convince Avram to take my daughter anyway. He didn't do that. He accepted Avram's denial and in total selflessness prayed for the right girl. And that's why it was answered immediately. And lest you know, we said this again, how do you get a prayer that you want in life to be answered immediately. Wouldn't you like an immediate answer? The answer is, you got to be sincere. You got to truly be selfless in your prayers, because you got to pray. If you don't pray, silly. But if you pray, you got to pray selflessly. I'm praying Hashem for this to happen because it's the right thing to happen, because I want it to happen, because I want to do a mitzvah. And of course, the harder you pray, the more sincere your prayer, the quicker it's answered. So of course, what happens? He finds Rivka. He gives her a sign. He gives the sign to himself, that is, that if she brings water, she has chesed, she has kindness. Oh, kindness once again sprouts up. I need a woman of kindness, a woman of outgoingness, a woman of generosity that's going to take the place of Sarah Imenu, because Sarah was a great helpmate to Avraham. And so I need the right girl. And so he goes ahead and he finds this little girl who's only 3 years old. We talked about that on Thursday. But what's interesting is he convinced her to go, because he convinced her you got a better life. I'm offering you a better life. I know you like your parents, this, that, and that, but they're simple people at best. I'm giving you a chance to marry the leading rabbi of the generation. I'm giving you an opportunity to marry number one in the world. It's your chance of a lifetime. And so, of course, Avraham, Rivka, he has to convince her, and he convinces her. So the next step in a good shidduch is to make sure that the boy likes the girl. So when she sees him praying in a row and garbed in prayer, as the Torah teaches, she falls off the camel in astonishment. She's, wow, this is the Gadol Hador. This is the greatest rabbi. This is the man I want to marry. So he marries her, brings her into the house, and all of a sudden, all that was missing because Sarah was left, and Sarah had passed away, redeemed and returned because of her. The blessing in the dough of the bread, the candle lit from Shabbos to Friday night to Friday night, from Shabbos to Shabbos. The cloud of glory over the tent, the symbolizing the divine presence. All this was in the tent of Avram because of Sarah. All this returned after Sarah's passing with the marriage to Rivka. Yitzchak's convinced this is the right one. But during the and this is a great mitzvah, we said of chesed, this is kindness. I gotta see kindness in the person. I see her giving me water and the camel's water, then I know that she's the right one for Yitzchak, and therefore Yitzchak will sense it himself, and I'll make a great shidduch, and I'll bring two people together for eternal happiness. What's eternal mean? Forever. So it means that a marriage is a marriage of commitment that does not mean a temporary relationship. Not 5 years, not 10 years, not 20 years, not 40 years. It's forever. What's forever mean? That when a relative passes, and you have to mourn the relative and be responsible for the relative's burial. That's part of your relationship to the relative, mother, father, brother, sister. Well, your wife is your relative too. Your husband's your relative too. How did they become relatives? They're strangers. There's no blood relative, no blood relation between the two of us. That became because of the commitment of marriage. That's why marriage is such a great expression of chesed as well. When the man gives the ring to the woman, he's expressing kindness, chesed. I'm ready to build the world again. We're going to build a new family with you. We're going to have children together. What's that mean? That means we're going to together come with the blessing of Hashem. But that can only happen if you act like Hashem. How do you act like Hashem? Kindness, generosity, compassion, feeling for others, the sense of helping a wedding, the sense of clothing, the sense of shelter, the sense of hospitality, and the sense of having children, raising children, and the sense of burial. The sense of burial, as we said, the body has to be prepared, and then there has to be a eulogy. So the eulogy is part of the expression of the eternity of love. And that's a beautiful thing. How many people go to a funeral, go to the chapel, hear the service, the rabbi says blah, 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 a few prayers, whatever, and maybe he says a meaningful eulogy, you learn something from it. Maybe it brings some tears to the family, or maybe even tears to you, and then you leave. and you don't even bother to go to the burial. What kind of funeral is that? What kind of mitzvah is that? What kind of kindness is that? You didn't go and see the guy buried? Why is burial so important? Well, if a person was walking in the street and he sees a dead body, he's obligated to stop everything he's doing, whatever mitzvah he's doing. He's going here, he's going there, for this mitzvah, that mitzvah, doesn't matter. And to deal with the burial of the person. For the person lies in shame and degradation, a corpse, alone, unattended. No one cares, no one loves. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, maintains a high level of purity so that he can do the service on Yom Kippur. He can do the service on Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies, in the temple, in the base of English. The only time at the end that anyone could ever go into the Holy of Holies was Yom Kippur, and only one person, the Kohen Gadol. And he's on his way to do it on Yom Kippur Day. And he sees a corpse. We all know that a dead body brings you purity. He's required to purify himself, to make himself impure, to take care of the dead and forget the service. But all of the Jewish people are dependent upon him for that service in Yom Kippur, in the Holy of Holies, in the temple, in the base of Mikdash. Let someone else do it. We'll find another Kohen to be in my place, to replace me. But I got to take care of this person. Who's this person? I don't know. Stranger. How much more so for family? How much more so do you have to see that person be buried? Got to go to the burial. So, of course, we have a tradition at the burial that everyone shovels a little bit of dirt in. That's a bunch of nonsense. That's not the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to shovel as much as you can to cover the grave. So as we can, because it's dug too deep. So we don't leave until the tractor comes and make sure that the hole of the grave is covered and filled. It is said that the person who has passed has not moved on to his eternity and has not began his journey towards heaven until the ground is full, till the grave is full, till it's fully covered. Avram's got a problem. He knows by prophecy where the grave should be. It should be in the town of Hebron. It should be in a cave called Machpelah, which, by the way, means double, which simply teaches us that couples are buried there. And the very first couple to be buried there was Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve. After that are three patriarchs and three matriarchs, the three fathers and three mothers. The only one not buried there is Rachel Imenu. That's a separate conversation, separate discussion. Avram wants to bury Sarah there, but someone else owns the property. Kind of Ephron. Ephron is from the people of Chet. That's the name of their people. There's a whole bunch of Canaanites there. And he says, I'd like to have this as a burial place. How much does it cost? Which teaches us a great lesson. It is very important for a person during his lifetime or her lifetime to secure property for burial. And you should be prepared to do that at whatever the cost. That's a very important mitzvah. And the quicker persons do it at young age, they're granted a bracha of longer life because of it. Persons should always be buying property. Some people buy property in LA. Maybe they can view various funeral places there for Jewish people, of course. But we're talking about for Jewish people. Jews are very kind of interesting people. You don't hear separate cemeteries for Baptists and Methodists and Christians and Muslims. Everyone gets buried together. Jews get very separate. But we've been separate since day one. We're separate as a people. We're separate alive. We're separate dead. We have a whole new section of world to come that's allotted to Jews. Sure, there is righteous Gentiles in the world to come, but it's a different section. But the section for Jews is a separate cemetery. We find the cemetery. You can buy plots here. You can buy plots in New York. Buy plots in Eretz Israel. Everybody wants to buy a plot in Israel. Be buried in Israel. They say that the resurrection of the dead, Tchias HaMesim, will begin when it begins when Mashiach is coming. Right, the 12 to 13 principles of faith is that, what's number 12? I believe Mashiach's coming. Number 13, I believe in the resurrection, Tchias HaMesim, with the coming of Mashiach. They said Tchias HaMesim will begin in Jerusalem. And there, where a person is buried in Jerusalem, is where the Tchias HaMesim begins. Everybody wants to be buried in Jerusalem. Here I am speaking to all of you nice people, all young people. Who's thinking about that? You should be. Because that's the mitzvah of buying property, even at a young age, which guarantees the bracha of a long age, of a long life. So Avram needs to make a purchase. And our friend Ephron, that's our friend, our friend Ephron says, oh, you're in the Nasi, you're a holy man of God. I know you, Avram. Everybody knows who you are. You can have it for free. Avram says, nothing, I don't want to pay for it. For two reasons, maybe three. One reason, I don't trust you. Good enough. Second reason is because it's appropriate that a person should buy property for his everlasting resting place. Third reason is because when you buy a piece of property like this, you're making an everlasting acquisition for the land of Israel. So let's digress for a moment and talk about Israel. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to live in Israel, but it's not one of the 613, nor is it one of the 271 that we learn. What is this mitzvah? The mitzvah is, of course, to live in the land that's so designated by Hashem. That's to be given to us after we left Egypt and marched through 40 years in the desert. Hashem said, here's the promised land. So the question is, why isn't it in one of the 613? The answer is because it is not an obligatory mitzvah. It is a mitzvah that if you option for it, you will get a great mitzvah because of it, and Hashem will reward you. What does a thing mean called an optional mitzvah? I always thought in Judaism, either you're obligated or you're not. I mean, either it's forbidden to do or it's obligated. I've never heard of these things. Options? Where are options? Well, there are options in the sense that if you do them, you get great reward. But there are reasons why there might be an option. And the reason is because there were extenuating circumstances that could prevent it. For instance, if let's say there's a destruction of the Beis Hamikdash 2,000 years ago and the Jews are sent into exile and we're out in the diaspora, then obviously, what does that mean? That means that we are going to not be in Eretz Yisrael. Those situations happen. But should we strive to return? Obviously. As often as quickly as possible, as often as possible, as much as we can. Three basic reasons why a Jew may live outside of Israel. A, he's making a good living. He's able to sustain himself outside of Israel better than better than Israel. So he's allowed to stay. He's allowed to go and not live there. Number two is he knows that his destiny in terms of a spouse, husband or wife, lives outside of Israel. Three, he found the yeshiva of learning Torah of Jews outside of Israel that he learns better with. So there are three options to do, but obviously the optimum is to live in Israel. And the way to do that is to continuously remember it in our prayers. And God should look at Zion all the time and return us to Zion all the time. Those kind of expressions do what? They help you to get closer to Eretz Yisrael. And that's what Avraham Avinu just did. He bought a plot in Eretz Yisrael. Now, the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael, therefore, is divided into 5 steps. I will tell you 4 of them. Number 1 is to make sure you purchase something there. Number 2, try to live there. Number 3, recognize that it's part of the covenant. That the covenant, that was the bris that was in circumcision, the bris is in Eretz Yisrael, the same bris. And it's expressed in the second bracha of Birkat HaMazon, the benching, When we say Birkat Hamazon, we bench after meals, after a meal with bread, we say the second bracha is no delacha, thank you Hashem for Eretz Yisrael. Thank you Hashem for Eretz Yisrael. Thank you for taking us out of Egypt. And thank you for the bris. All of these three items are all part of the bris. Just like circumcision is the bris, so is Eretz Yisrael the bris. So is leaving Egypt the bris. So is giving the Torah a bris. It's all part of the covenant and agreement between Hashem and the Jewish people. And that's what Avraham accomplished by buying this piece of property. And buying this piece of property, what Hashem did, what Avraham did, was he got a place in Eretz Yisrael that's his. But he got a better place than just his. You see, you can buy a house, you can buy a courtyard, you can buy a basketball court. You can buy anything you want in Eretz Yisrael. You can buy a house or a field or a business or whatever it is, a building. But the only thing that's really permanent is your burial place. That's what you got to bury. That's what you got to buy. And in buying that, this is an eternal spot for the Jewish people. What Avram realizes when he purchases this piece of property for Sarah's burial, that means Sarah's here forever, I'll be here forever, the Jewish people will be here forever. Now, you know, politically nowadays, Hebron, which is the city of the cave of Machpelah, has become a great source of dispute amongst the Arabs particularly, and the world at large. And the answer is, and the point of that is, of course, is that that their claim is completely unfounded. Well, they say it's Avraham, we're the children of Avraham, we're Ishmael. Correct, except Ishmael's not buried in Machpelah. Avraham's son, the other son, Yitzchak, our father, he's buried in Eretz Yisrael. He's buried in the Machpelah of Hebron. The idea of establishing Jewish rights to Israel over Arab rights is the right of Yitzchak over Yishmael. Yishmael, at the end of the day, he did, Yishmael, the father of the Arab nations, he did tshuva, he repented at the end of yesterday's parsha. When Avram himself dies at the end of the parsha, Sarah died at the beginning of the parsha, Avram dies at the end of the parsha, he's buried by his two sons. Well, that was very nice of Yishmael to join in. Yishmael joins in with Yitzchak, his brother, to bury their father. What a great description of honoring parents, of love and responsibility for relatives we explained. But the fact that Yishmael participates, well, I thought Yishmael was thrown out of the house. I thought Yishmael and the Arab nations were out to no good, up to no good. Maybe they were. But the reality is that Ishmael did tshuva. He repented. The Arab nations repented. And the Arab nations are really not as dangerous to us as the European nations and the children of Esau. And that's a good discussion for next week. But politically speaking, the Arab problem is a European problem. Because Europe is festering the hatred. Because Ishmael himself did tshuva. They invested the hatred amongst Arab nations. The Arab, father of the Arabs, Ishmael did tshuva. How do we know he did tshuva? For one thing, it says Avram died in great peace and in great fulfillment of his life. He did not die with sadness and tragedy. All of his dreams came true, including a son, including his son's wife, and including even his other son Yishmael did tshuva. How do we know? Because when the two of them came, it's Yitzchak who's listed first, not Yishmael. Yishmael should have been listed first. He's the firstborn. Why was Yitzchak listed first? Because Yishmael pushed him forward. Why did Yishmael push him forward? Because Yishmael said, "You're the great Yitzchak. You're the one that's chosen by Hashem to carry on Avram's lesson, not me, not the Arab nation, the Jewish nation. And I push you forward to give you that honor." And in so doing, it caused Avraham, the nifter, the one who's passed away, a great sense of comfort, peace, and contentment upon his passing. That my son Yishmael has recognized the prominence, the preeminence of Yitzchak, and he's done tshuva. All my life is now complete. What a beautiful way to pass on to the next world. Sarah Imenu, at the beginning of the parsha, is passed away as well. In that same sense of Yitzchak, my Yitzchak, has become the great God Lador. He just finished the Akedah. He asserted his own self. We're going to get him a wife to replace him, to give him the support he needs. Again, passed away after a life of fulfillment, of good achievement and accomplishment. She lived 127 years. The pasuk says, why do we know? To know how long she lived? The answer is because all of her years were good. All of her years were productive. All of her years need to be expressed in the beauty that each year represented. Every year represented greatness and growth until the completion of 127. And so burial is the key to the mitzvah of kindness shel emes. Chesed shel emes means the kindness of greatest truth. There is no greater truth of kindness and sincerity and selflessness than burial of the dead, because you get nothing for it. Absolutely nothing in return. The dead man can't give you nothing. With that in mind, we then understand that the sense of Avram's accomplishment of chesed is the highest level. Now, he also accomplishes the eternity of his relationship because he buries his wife, the one who was not born a relative to him. And that's how husbands and wives become relatives. They become relatives through the sense, one second, please. They become relatives through the sense of their commitment to one another in marriage. So the chesed that brought the two of them together, that produced a child, continues on forever and ever to an eternal resting place where they rest together in an eternal spot called Chevron and the Machpelah, which is in Eretz Yisrael, which means that Eretz Yisrael is eternal. Just like my relationship with my wife is eternal, and burial is eternal, and the world to come is eternal, the Jewish connection with Israel is eternal. But Avraham goes further and says, I know it's an eternal covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people. Hashem promised me that. He made me leave my hometown and go to Eretz Yisrael in the first place. But I needed to do more about Eretz Yisrael to absolutely guarantee that it's mine. And that is, make a purchase. You got to make a purchase. By making a purchase, then what you do is you establish an eternal connection with Eretz Yisrael. Eventually, you want to live there. But living there, of course, is the essence of the mitzvah. So that's the second step. Number one, make a purchase. Number two, live there. Number three, recognize it's a covenant. And then there's a fourth step. And this is one that's extremely important to understand of how Hashem connects us to Eretz Yisrael. Displace the others. Whoever's living there has to get out. Unless, of course, he accepts to be a servant to the Jewish people. You want to be a servant to us and help us out and help us fulfill the destiny of enlightening and civilizing the world, that's great. If not, do your own thing. Go to Saudi Arabia. Go to Kuwait. Wherever you want to go. But not here. Of course, Palestinians might think differently, but they want to listen to what we have to say and then follow our rules. That's fine. They don't want to, then there's plenty of other Arab countries. 21 of them, I'm told. So we're not making Israel the 22nd Arab state. It's not going to become a Palestinian state. It's going to say one Jewish state, which is kind of interesting. 21 Arab states, one Jewish state. Maybe you feel like we're kind of small or insignificant. To the contrary. That one is worth that 21 because it's a gift from God. But whoever's there either adjusts to our rulership or we are obligated to displace them. Where did we learn this from? From the beginning of creation. In the beginning of creation, you look it up on your own, the very first passage, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Rashi comments and says, what do I need to talk about creation for? If the Torah is a law book, start with the law, start with the mitzvahs. The answer is because I started with creation, remember who runs the world. And who runs the world is manifested by whom he puts in whichever country. If you put the Portuguese in Portugal, and he put the English in England, and he put the Australians in Australia, and he put the French in France, he put the Jews in Israel. And that's the way it is. And if you have to displace them, Rashi says, you are required to displace them. And when Joshua marched into Eretz Yisrael after 40 years in the desert, he had to displace them again. And that's the concept of control of Eretz Yisrael. And that's the mitzvah of Eretz Yisrael. so that it remains a holy and distinct and separate place for the Jewish people. And the only way to guarantee the eternal connection of possession is those burial places. And that's why Hebron, particularly the Arabs, have absolutely no claim to, because not only is Avram and Sarah buried there, and Adam and Chava buried there, but so is Yitzchak and Rivka, and Yaakov and Leah. The purchase of this land was negotiated by a man named Avram with a man named Ephron, like we explained. Well, Avram says, I need this burial place. I got to charge my mitzvah. And Ephron comes up as a big shot and says, well, Avram, I know you're a big guy. You're a leader of God and a famous man. You have for nothing. And Avram says, nothing doing. I want to pay. Oh, you want to pay? 400. 400. I would have thought that a man who was offering you nothing would at least offer you a discount. If you insist on paying, okay, pay a little bit. No. You want to pay? Full top dollar. What does he mean? He means he's a guy who speaks heavily, brags largely, and does nothing. Empty barrels make the loudest noise. And more the Mishnah says, say little, do much. He says much and does little. He's the exact opposite of what the Mishnah teaches us. So Avram says, listen, I'm a stranger and a dweller in this land. Ger v'toshav. How do you, either one or the other, either you're a stranger or you're a dweller. How do you end up being both of them? How do you end up being both a stranger and a dweller? Avram explains and he says, look, I'm dwelling here now, but it's not mine yet. It won't be mine till Joshua comes in years later after the departure from Egypt. And the Jews have left Mitzrayim from Moshe with Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership and received the Torah and then go into Eretz Yisrael. So now I'm just a stranger. But ultimately it's going to be mine. So I'm telling you right now, Ephraim, one thing. Either you take the money, as we agree upon, or I will forcibly take it from you. How does Avram have that courage to say that? The answer is, you got to know the right time. How did the Jewish people have the courage in 1948 to establish a state of Israel when every other country in the world did not support it? When every country in the world. What do you want? When every country in the world did not. America was the first to recognize us. There was a whole argument in the United Nations. Maybe we should give this part to the Jews, not this part to the Jews, this part to the Arabs, keep them happy. We called it partition. Arabs weren't happy. We were delighted. They started a war. We fought back. What's the concept of taking it? And you have to see the moment. The moment called for it. Sarah's death called for immediate action. The end of the Holocaust and the loss of 6 million in 1945 said there is now a time for action. And there is a time when you have to move forward and be proactive, even in your face, to the Goyim and to the Arabs and to Ephron of the Chet nation, and say, listen, we want to negotiate. We want to go to the UN. We'll pay whatever price it is, top dollar, 400, no big deal. But if not, we're taking it anyway. And Jewish people in 1948 declared statehood. Everyone thought it was the craziest thing. You have to imagine what it was like in 1948. To be Jewish was like to be on the bottom of the barrel. Today we're top dollar. Today we're big people today. Today the Jews are recognized, right? Of course, Israel still doesn't get any recognition. We all know that. But you have to be strong and say, Hashem has given us this obligation now. It's time to connect with eternity. Avram says, now I've got to take this. I need this burial place. This is going to be eternal possession of the Jewish people in Israel. But it will also be the eternal reflection of our relationship as husband and wife. Because I have assumed that obligation as if you were my relative, because you're my most profound relative of all. And Torah teaches, or the Gemara teaches, that when Avraham handed over money to Ephron, to get the crave, that's how we learn, because of the same word usage, that a man gets married using money. Nowadays, we use a ring, which is worth money. But the idea is that when you make that acquisition or give that ring and make that proclamation, you are betrothed to me, Mekudeshly, with this ring, what you're saying is, this is eternal. This is forever, till the day we die and beyond. And that's what the real relationship of marriage is. And it's expressed through Sarah's passing, a lifetime together of fruition and fruitfulness and productivity and continuing beyond. So at the end, Yitzchak has his shidduch made, and he is betrothed to Rivka, and he continues now on as a second Jewish patriarch, second Jewish father. Avram passes away, and Yitzchak is mourning, and comes Hashem again to do another kindness from heaven above, another kindness that we have to learn to emulate and to follow in those ways, those footsteps, that mitzvah number 5. He comes to comfort the mourner, and he blesses Yitzchak, and he blesses him and gives him comfort. You're going to continue on and follow your father's footsteps. And the comfort that you have is that your father's memory will be eternal. You'll never forget him. You'll always remember him by virtue of the fact that you live the kind of life that he mapped out for you, but you'll do so within the scope of your own creativity. And that's why you're the second leader of the generation after Avraham. This is the mitzvah intertwined, the mitzvah of Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of chesed, the mitzvah of family, the mitzvah of taking care of your children, making sure that your child has a wife. You're required to take care of your children to the point where you secure their wedding, pay for their wedding, and make sure that they're married with the right persons. That's part of the responsibility of taking care of your child, to get him a Jewish education, to teach him how to swim, and to teach her a job, and so forth and so on. This is the responsibility of what the family was built upon in terms of chesed once the couple gets married. And at the time of a child's birth, boy or girl, we give a bracha to the parents. And the bracha is, your children should go to Torah, chuppah, and ma'asim tovim. They should grow to learn Torah, be religious, follow the ways of Hashem, and then get married. Because you've trained them properly with the proper value, which is to get married, assume a responsibility, make an everlasting commitment, and building another family. That's ma'asim tovim, good deeds. The real good deeds that a person does is only after marriage, when the person brings in new children to the world. And so that's why, at this point in time, we're talking almost exclusively in this area with chesed, kindness. Now, we all know that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, of blessed memory, had no children. But he had thousands and thousands and thousands of Hasidim, whom he influenced, he taught, he inspired. They follow in his path. They continue on teaching his teachings. That's as good as having children. If you're out there in the public doing for other people, particularly the promotion of our values and promotions of our tradition, the teachings of what it means to be a religious Jew, then you have loads of children whom you are helping and directing and giving kindness to as well. And so the essence of trying to establish a world must be based upon the concept of kindness of chesed. And that kindness of chesed is a establishment of a purpose and direction for which we are living for. That's what you want to give your kids, the people you meet, the friendships you develop, the relationships you develop. Chesed. And you want to show that as a reflection of Hashem. I'm doing what Hashem would do. I feel like Hashem. I sense now what Hashem does for me. Now I understand what kindness is all about, and I understand what Hashem is all about. Not all about, but to some degree I get a perspective. Because that perspective helps me and gives me that sense of purpose. What am I doing here in the first place? What's it all about? Well, what am I here for? What am I doing here? I'm here as a creature of God to emulate God's ways and thereby bring God's consciousness or consciousness of God to the rest of the world. So whenever I do something that helps the world see God clearer, whether it's a fellow Jew or a non-Jew, doesn't matter, I have actually done the kindness, the chesed, of giving people a sense of the truth and a sense of what they can do with their lives and give them some sense of direction. The idea of trying to do this is the purpose of existence. Anything else less than this, you're not living. You haven't got people in your home for guests. You haven't been there for when a person needs you. Are you there when a person gets married? Or you're too busy to go to the wedding and to help out when they needed help, but people to make rejoicing? Were you there at the time of the person's passing? Were you there at the funeral? When a person's sitting shiva and mourning for 7 days after the funeral, are you there to visit with them and comfort them and talk to them? Because people often find themselves in a very awkward spot. We've talked about it many times. What do you say when you walk into a house of mourning? Okay, Rabbi, you're experiencing all this stuff. What do you say? And the answer is nothing. Nothing. You're supposed to wait till the mourner speaks. And certainly, there's no point in having the conversation of diversion, which you speak about something else. I just lost someone as dear to me and I loved. You want to talk to me about a baseball game? You want to make a joke, make me feel happy? That doesn't help. You speak about the person, speak about your loss, speak about how beautiful your relationship was. And in that way, you comfort. When Hashem comforts Yitzchak at the house of mourning, and he's sitting Shiva, at that point, Yitzchak just lost his father, and now he's truly on his own. Now he's truly the leader. He needs a lot of comfort, a lot of support. Hashem comes to him and says to him, I'm here for you. Just like we should be saying to people, we're here for you, whatever you need. That's why people provide food for those sitting in Shiva for 7 days of mourning. We said to Hashem, well, we said to the person, we're here for you. Hashem said to Yitzchak, I'm here for you in the memory of your loved one, your father, Avraham Avinu. And that gives Yitzchak so much comfort, the greatness of my father. And I'm taking over his legacy. And I have Hashem's support, just like Hashem supported my father, supports me. How much I feel towards my father, how close I feel towards my father, how much I appreciate and owe my father. And that's the sense of kindness that you offer, the kind of proper things to read or to say. These mitzvos that we're talking about, mitzvah of chesed, will become balanced with a new set of mitzvahs, which we'll talk about next week, the mitzvahs of Yitzchak. The mitzvah not of necessarily of kindness, he continued, of course, the kindness of his father, and it's written in the parsha, but also mitzvahs dealing with gevura, inner strength. Avram was an extrovert, Yitzchak was an introvert, and they complemented each other. And we as people need to find balance to do both. There's a time for others, and there's a time for yourself. In time for yourself, the most singular, most important personal thing you can do is your personal communication with Hashem, prayer. And that's what Rivka sees in Yitzchak when she comes. Eliezer brings Rivka to Yitzchak, and she sees him from afar, and he's all aglow because he's davening mincha. The rabbis teach. Rabbis tell us we daven 3 times a day, Shabbos, Mincha, Maariv. All 3 of them were initially initiated by Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Avram started Shachris in the morning. We have a proof to that in the passage where he prays for the people of Sdom. Yitzchak institutes Mincha at this point when he's davening to himself and he begs Hashem that the shidduch should work and that the Rivka should be the right one. And Yaakov, which we'll talk about later, started Maariv. But that's called creativity. That's called being a new leader, starting something new. within the scope of what we have in our tradition, not veering off from our tradition, but keeping it strong and building. Avram starts Shachris. Yitzchak starts Mincha. Get it? So now we're getting an idea of what it means to be a creative leader. Yitzchak's already there from the time of him willingly going to the Akedah and being willing to be slaughtered. He already has become into his own. Now Rivka sees it and she falls off the couch. She's like, wow, look at this guy. I just married the holiest person in the world. And because Yitzchak finds her worthy. Why does Yitzchak find her worthy? Because Yitzchak sees that all those beautiful things that were in his mother's tent, when they were in their tent when Mother Sarah was alive, is now missing because Mother Sarah has passed away, has been replaced by Rivka's presence. She bakes challah. She lights candles. She has the divine presence over the tent. It's a sense of what womanhood does. Women have this power to energize the Yitzchak that they marry. But they have to be the one to energize them. Yitzchak goes nowhere without her. Yitzchak has no candles, no light in his life. Yitzchak has no challah to eat. Yitzchak brings home the money for the challah, for doing his work, but who's going to bake it? Who's going to make that there's a blessing into the challah? You can bake challah and fail. You can make challah, make it rich, beautiful, delicious. It's up to the merit of the woman. Yitzchak can't go any further with all his creativity. And he prays such in Mincha, and he says, Hashem, send me the right one. And Rivka watches him pray. He brings Rivka into his home, and all of a sudden the candles are lit again. All of a sudden, the dough becomes spread and developed, and there's much more than there was before. And the crowd that was missing now is there. The cloud of Shemayim, the cloud of Hashem, the sense of Hashem's presence is now in our tent back again. And that's what husband and wife create when they marry. They bring the divine presence with them to their home. That's what Rivka brought to Yitzchak. Yitzchak knew she was the right one. And then Yitzchak and Rivka realized that we are going to build together a new home to continue on the legacy of Avram and Sarah and move forward with the development of the Jewish people. And the development shall be Yitzchak's own brand, a brand of introspection, a brand of power, a brand of discipline, a brand of prayer, a brand of personal growth. Not to the exclusion of what Avram did, but to the addition of what Avram did. The outgoing kindness that Avram started our people with, which God started the world with, will be complemented by Yitzchak with this new sense of real connection to God, real spirituality, the real message to develop. I'm going to give you more than food when you come into my house. I'm going to give the message of Hashem. I'm going to teach you Torah. I'm going to teach you how to daven, teach you how to pray. And that develops, and that's the challenge of all of us to develop in terms of proper balance. So I want to thank everyone for joining me at the Zoom today. Thank you all for coming. I hope that you enjoy this these sets of mitzvos based upon the parsha. Please look at the first 4 mitzvos in the book about Hashem, review them, including mitzvah 5. Thank you, Tia. There's the thumb up there. In terms of the mitzvah 5 and 6, one is to emulate God's ways, the other is to bring sanctification to God's name. And by doing God's ways, you make the people more aware of Hashem, sanctify God's name. We will continue with Parsha this Thursday night coming. And then the following Sunday, we will continue with mitzvahs as well. Thank you all for coming. Have a great week. However, please make sure that everyone has everyone is signed in over there. And so we have a whole set of getting that done. Okay, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Washington.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, can you see me?
I do. I see you. I see Vanessa, Jew as well. And I see
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, I see Nayeli, I see Gabriella. Okay, Lisa, Ardell, Tia, Jobana,
Thank
Jessica.
you.
Jessica. Oh, I see Jessica. There you are.
Hi. Jessica Mata.
Mark Rooney, there you are.
Yes, Rabbi. I'm
Look,
good here.
good looking today. There's Lisa. Wow, terrific. Alexandra, Ardell, Yehuda, Nayeli.
Thank you.
Yehuda, and
Great class, Rabbi.
by the way, folks, if you see Yehuda and Sarah Piha on the on this on the Zoom, I wish them all mazel tov. They just had a baby boy in San Diego.
Oh,
Mazel tov.